For the 2020 model year, Toyota did more than just redesign the Corolla. They're also restructuring their low-cost hybrid lineup. Because for the 2020 calendar year, the Prius C appears to be out, and the new Toyota Corolla hybrid appears to be in. The first time the Corolla has ever received a hybrid drivetrain. The first thing to know about the Corolla Hybrid is that this will be available only in one trim, the LE Hybrid trim, for $22,950 starting. So if you want to get the XSE or SE styling, which is a little bit different up front, you will have to move over to the gas-only drivetrain. Or if you want to get some of the fancier features that are available in the XLE version, you'll have to move back over to the gas drivetrain or over to the Toyota Prius. As we see with the hybrid versions of the Camry and the RAV4, the overall look of the Corolla doesn't change too much when they drop the hybrid system under the hood. So we get the same basic LED headlamps that we see in the non-hybrid Corolla. These are actually standard on all 2020 Corolla models. There's some blue accenting on this Toyota logo right here that also hides the radar adaptive cruise control sensor, but other than that, the front end looks essentially the same as the LE and XLE. LED headlamps are standard on all models of the Corolla for 2020, and we have these distinctive J strips running right there inside that light module as well. Now behind the grille, there are a few changes versus the non-hybrid model. We get active grille shutters to help improve overall aerodynamic efficiency. In case you didn't know, this new Toyota Corolla is actually based on the same platform that the new Toyota Prius rides on, the new TNGA platform from Toyota. At 182.3 inches long, it is about the same size as the current generation Prius. This is actually about 3 inches longer. That's because of the overall more traditional sedan-like profile versus what we see in the Prius. As I said at the beginning of the video, Toyota has by all appearances killed off the entry-level Prius C in the United States, leaving this to be the inexpensive hybrid model from Toyota. This is a full 2 feet longer than that Prius C and has considerably more interior room as well as better performance as well. So if you're looking for an inexpensive hybrid from Toyota, this is definitely going to be the model for you. But because this shares the same drivetrain as the Toyota Prius and likely to help keep it from eating up Prius sales, they're keeping options limited on this trim. So again, it comes only in that LE form. If you want some of those higher end features, you will have to move up to the dedicated hybrid line. Just like the front, out back, we get basically the same look that we find in the non-hybrid versions of the Corolla. Again, blue trim right there on that Toyota logo, and we have a visible exhaust tip over there on that side. One thing that you'll definitely notice down here at the bottom of the bumper, although not unique to the hybrid model, is that we get kind of a boring lower bumper versus the upper end trims of the Corolla. Now, I assume that you probably can swap this section out. The upper end trims get sort of an egg crate effect right here instead of this plain black piece. Under the hood, we get our choice of 3 different drivetrains for 2020. We have the 1.8-liter 4-cylinder engine borrowed out of the old LE Eco. We then have a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine that's much newer, borrowed out of the Lexus UX, and of course the related Corolla hatchback. But under this hood, which is what we're here to talk about, we have the same drivetrain as the current generation Toyota Prius. It's a 1.8-liter 4-cylinder Atkinson cycle engine mated to Toyota's hybrid drivetrain system, which combines 2 motor generator units and a planetary gear set. This system gives us the same total horsepower as the Prius at 121 horsepower and 52 miles per gallon combined on the latest cycle, making this definitely one of the most efficient compact sedans you can buy in America. If you want more efficiency than this, you will have to move over to the more dedicated compact hybrid vehicles like the Prius or the Hyundai Ioniq. Overall front seat comfort is pretty average for a vehicle in this price range. We do have a manual only seat in the hybrid trim of the Corolla. If you want a power seat, you will have to look elsewhere. It is worth noting that the most direct competition to this in some ways would be the new Honda Insight, which is basically a Civic hybrid. Now it's trying to be a slightly more premium option in this segment, a different mission than what we find in this Corolla. And that's really obvious when you take a look at the overall seat, the way that the seat adjusts versus what we find available in the Insight, and of course the overall interior, which we'll look at here in a bit. When drawing comparisons, remember that the Insight is available in different trim levels, and over here in the Corolla Hybrid, we just get the one that we're looking at here. So more premium options are available in the Insight, but when you directly compare it to this, they're actually not too far off. Because of the positioning of the battery pack right here under the rear seats, we see the same sort of reduction in rear seat headroom as we find in the Camry and Accord hybrids. And that means that while I was able to sit upright with my head just barely touching the ceiling in the non-hybrid version of the Corolla, in this version, I do have to kind of crane my head to one side in order to sit upright in the rear seat. Aside from that, overall legroom and other interior dimensions haven't really changed. That means that this interior overall seems to be a little bit tighter than the outgoing Corolla, but it is actually very comparable to what we see in the Toyota Prius, although I did find a little bit more usable headroom in that dedicated hybrid model. As with the Camry and Avalon hybrids, they have packaged the battery under the rear seats, which means that we don't have any loss of cargo capacity versus the non-hybrid Corolla. This still comes in at 13 cubic feet, which is fairly average for this segment. Now, it is worth noting that, again, like the gasoline-only Corolla, you cannot put 22-inch roller bags in this position and still close the trunk lid, which is something that you can do in some of this vehicle's competition. Now, a really nice touch is that under the cargo area load floor, we still find a spare tire, even in the hybrid trim. And that's something that a lot of manufacturers delete in order to save weight. If you've never cared for the Prius's lift-back form or the overall styling, then the Corolla could be a good option for you because this is much more conventionally styled. However, on the downside, this cargo area is considerably smaller than what we find in that Prius and a lot less practical than the Prius's lift-back design. On the inside, we find the same interior as the non-hybrid LE trim with just a few slight variations. So we still get height adjustable shoulder belts for the driver and the front passenger right over there, two-way adjustable headrests, fabric upholstery. The fabric is tweaked a little bit for the hybrid model. You can see we have those interesting little texture sections right there in the middle. It's a two-tone gray on gray fabric design. Moving over to the front doors, we find fabric armrests and a few less soft touch plastic pieces than we find available in the top end trims of the gas model. So this lighter upper section right here, that is a hard plastic in the LE trim, hybrid or non-hybrid. But then if we move on over to the dashboard, the corresponding light section actually becomes a soft touch plastic, as does this upper charcoal section right there. The main difference between the LE trim and the upper end trims is that we don't get the added stitching effect on those dashboard components. We have the same 8-inch color touchscreen LCD that we find in the upper end trims. This is an upgrade from the base 7-inch screen. And that touchscreen does support Apple CarPlay and Amazon Alexa integration. Single zone automatic climate control, a place where you can store but not charge your smartphones right down there below that section of the dashboard. We have a pretty traditional shifter right here, so nothing funky going on in this model. You'll find the drive mode buttons and EV mode buttons right up there in front of that shifter. We have an electronic parking brake right there and auto brake hold in this model, two large cup holders, and basically the same armrest as the non-hybrid. The instrument cluster is the upgraded partial LCD cluster that we see in the upper end trims of the Corolla. And then we have basically the same steering wheel that we find in the other Corolla lower end models. This is a urethane wheel. Leather wheel does not appear to be available in the hybrid trim. As you'd expect out of a vehicle that uses the same hybrid drivetrain as the Prius and overall weighs about the same as the Prius, 0 to 60 time is going to be in the same neighborhood. So we're talking about 9.5 to 9.6 seconds 0 to 60 here. This is going to be notably slower than something like the Honda Insight, which gives us 151 horsepower. Overall 0 to 60 performance is likely going to be below what we see in the Honda Insight because this system just doesn't produce as much power. But it should be substantially similar to what we see in the Hyundai Ioniq because the overall power levels are comparable and power to weight figures are about the same as well. We haven't been able to do our official 0 to 60 testing yet, but I suspect this is going to be pretty much the same as the 1.8 liter four-cylinder engine as well. In terms of overall handling ability, the hybrid model is likely going to fall a little bit behind the other versions of the Corolla because these tires are more eco-focused. We also don't have sidewalls that are quite as thin as we find on those other tires, so the lower profile tires help improve handling. And then of course there's the tire width itself. These tires are skinnier than the tires that we find in the upper end and better handling trims of the Corolla. And of course, when compared to the competition, these tires are narrower than what you'll find on some of the trims of Ioniq and of course the Insight as well. And that does play directly into the overall handling ability. Now in this generation of the Corolla, Toyota has made some serious improvements to the way that the suspension works. We have that independent suspension in the rear, which really helps the overall handling feel when you're turning in. It also really helps the vehicle be more settled on broken pavement, especially in corners. And that's an area where the previous generation Corolla and also the previous generation Prius didn't do as well as some of the competition. But the current generation Prius and this current generation Corolla have really improved on that. And again, keep in mind this is related to the current generation Prius. I'm not sure how many customers will really be pushing their hybrids that hard out on the road, but if you choose to do so, this suspension definitely has a more solid, more stable, more sorted feeling to it than we found in the previous generation Corolla. As we see in the other versions of the Corolla, the hybrid Corolla has a pretty decent ride to it. This actually is one of the more compliant rides in this segment, although bear in mind that most compact vehicles like this have become a little bit firmer over time. So this is not going to be as soft as some of the Corollas you might remember, but it definitely is still very comfortable for a long highway trip. Cabin noise is fairly competitive in this segment. We haven't been able to test this on our own home turf, but expect this to be a little bit quieter than something like the Hyundai Ioniq in terms of overall cabin noise. Also expect this to be a little bit quieter than the Toyota Corolla hatchback. Sedans, generally speaking, are a little bit quieter because there's just more in the way of the tires in the back of the vehicle and the cabin in here. We get a separate trunk that's closed off, a little bit more sound deadening ability overall versus a hatchback where that's all open to the cab. As I usually say, be sure and stay tuned because we will have our complete official test numbers on this just as soon as I can get my hands on one for a week. At that point in time, we'll also be able to tell you what the overall fuel economy should be like. During our day of mixed driving in this vehicle, but not too many miles, we have been averaging over 50 miles per gallon. Of course, your mileage will vary, but this vehicle should get better fuel economy out on the open highway than what we find in the Honda Insight just due to the overall design of the drivetrain, especially if your commute regularly takes you over about 70 miles an hour or so. The Honda hybrid system's efficiency really starts dropping at those higher speeds. We don't see a drop to the same extent in the Toyota hybrid system because of this system's overall design. Of course, if you're looking for a vehicle with the absolute best fuel economy, then that would be in the high efficiency versions of the Prius, or of course a competitor like the Hyundai Ioniq. The Ioniq does relatively well in terms of its overall fuel efficiency scores, but the Prius will still beat it in real-world driving for most folks out there. Bottom line with the Corolla Hybrid is if you've been looking for a Corolla with a hybrid system, that's exactly what you're getting with the 2020 Corolla Hybrid. It drives basically like the new Corolla Hybrid, which is to say it's definitely more engaging than the outgoing Corolla, but it also sounds like a little bit of Prius under the hood. We get that same drivetrain under the same sort of electric whine into the cabin. It's fairly muted, as we find in most modern hybrids, but it is still there if you're looking for it. And of course, overall, we get a much more conventional experience in this cabin than we find in a Toyota Prius. The instrument cluster is right in front of me, exactly where you'd expect it. The infotainment system is up here on the dashboard, just like most modern compact sedans. This just feels more like a regular car that just happens to get 52 miles per gallon. Toyota tells us that the 2020 Corolla Hybrid will be available essentially immediately, and it will start at $22,950. That is a notable about $2,000 bump over the outgoing Prius C, which was the former least expensive hybrid in the Toyota lineup. On the other hand, the Corolla Hybrid is about $1,000 less expensive than the Toyota Prius. And again, I think this is the more handsome, more elegant, more restrained styled vehicle overall. So if you've wanted a Prius, but you've always thought to yourself, gosh, it's just a little bit too funky for my tastes, then this could be an excellent option. This is also about the same price as the Hyundai Ioniq Hybrid and of course the Honda Insight Hybrid, which was new for last year. As always, you'll have to wait until we can get our hands on one of these for a complete week so we can run it through our usual battery of tests and then do our full comparison section as well. But I can tell you at the moment that in my head, at least, this seems to be more of a direct competitor to the Honda Insight than the Hyundai Ioniq, because the Ioniq really was designed to be more of a Prius competitor. It's a dedicated green vehicle, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or electric. It's also a liftback, not a traditional sedan like the Corolla right here. Now that said, I do think that the Ioniq is one of the most competitive vehicles in the compact sedan or compact liftback category if you want to combine those two categories together. It has excellent driving dynamics, it has reasonable performance, and excellent fuel efficiency as well. But that can all actually be said of this new Corolla Hybrid as well. This generation of the Corolla is notably more fun to drive than the previous generation thanks to a new independent rear suspension and of course the fact that it shares parts with other vehicles in Toyota's lineup which were designed for a more sporty driving dynamic. We also get improved rear braking versus those previous generations of the Corolla. Now the big difference between this and the Honda Insight again is that we don't have those upper end trims available in the Corolla Hybrid, and we do over there on the Insight. So if you're after leather upholstery, heated seats, those sorts of things, you will find those available in the Insight, and you will not find them over here in the Corolla. You'll also find better 0 to 60 performance over there on the Insight because its hybrid system does produce more power. Now, on the other hand, the Insight is just not as efficient in real-world driving as the Corolla is going to be. And we've seen that across the lineup when comparing Honda's hybrid systems to Toyota's hybrid systems. By their overall design, especially if you drive at higher speeds, you're not going to get the same kind of highway efficiency numbers that we find in the Toyota hybrid system. So you should expect this model likely to get right around its EPA score or slightly above, as we have seen in other Toyota hybrids. For instance, the Camry hybrid, the Accord hybrid, the Prius, they all generally seem to score a little bit above their EPA score in our testing. But the Honda Insight actually managed to achieve a lower than EPA score in our testing because of that higher speed highway fuel economy. That's been our quick look at the 2020 Corolla Hybrid. Be sure and comment down there in the comment section below and tell me, if you were shopping in this segment, which would you choose? Would you choose the Corolla Hybrid? Would you get the Insight Hybrid? Or would you get that Hyundai Ioniq Hybrid? I suspect that if it were me, I would be pretty torn between the Ioniq Hybrid and the Insight Hybrid. I like the way the Ioniq Hybrid drives and it gets excellent fuel economy, and the Insight Hybrid, I like the interior and the overall feature set that you can get in the upper end trims. And the lack of the upper end trim options in the Corolla Hybrid really is why I would prefer to get one of those other options. However, if you're looking down here at $23,000 or so, this is going to be an easy win for the Corolla. And I would say if you're shopping for an LE or perhaps even possibly an SE trim of the Corolla, I would probably get the hybrid instead of either of those models. Versus the LE trim, the average shopper should save about $400 to $500 a year in overall fuel costs, and that's a pretty big deal even at today's low fuel costs. That means that the average owner should expect an overall payback time of between 5 and 6 years between this and that LE trim. Again, let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Check out the full, complete review of this when it comes out just as soon as we can get our hands on one. I'll see you later.